All right, following a down 2013 at 3-9, NC State bouncing back with a couple of bowl appearances and an 8-5 record in 2015. Signing day is just about 9 days away now. We bring in Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC to help us break down the Wolfpack and their objectives for National Signing Day in competing with the likes of Florida State and Clemson. The big get right here, a name that's awfully familiar to all of us, Mike, if we start right there with Thad Moss.
Yeah, so Thad Moss, the son of Randy Moss. So there you go. Right off the top, you're thinking, man, this guy has to be a player. And he is. He's a four-star tight end out of Charlotte, North Carolina, Mallard Creek High School, 6'4", 240. He's drawn comparisons to Rob Gronkowski. If you look up his highlight video on YouTube, you see immediately a video of him going up over guys in the end zone on fade routes and catching passes over him, much similar to how Rob Gronkowski plays for Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. But yeah, Thad Moss is a big-time target at tight end, and looking at NC State, they love to target their tight ends. And you and I talked at length about David Grinnage this past season, prior to this past season when we did our season previews, and David Grinnage only had 25 catches for 290 yards this year, and he's going into his senior year there for NC State. But they had the emergence of Jalen Samuels, a tight end, who was their leading receiver, 65 catches for 600 yards and 7 touchdowns. So he led them in all 3 of those categories. So we know NC State loves to target their tight ends, and while Thad Moss might not necessarily get playing time right away, he's a guy that can definitely compete and go out and make some plays for them. And being a 4-star recruit, you never know what's going to happen. If he comes in and impresses the coaching staff, he could get some early playing time. And for that NC State offense, that means you're getting a lot of passes to the tight end, and a situation there for Thad Moss, it really couldn't work out better there at NC State.
You know, Mike, probably the single player most responsible for the turnaround at NC State after the down 2013 I alluded to would be Jacoby Brissett, dual threat quarterback, very impressive seasons, 2 consecutive years, huge TD to interception ratio, of course, provided with all the injuries and suspensions at running back this past season. The option at running back to break, contain, and pick up rushing yardage. Jacoby Brissett moves on from here. The quarterback situation a bit in flux, but at the same time, some prime candidates to fill in.
Yeah, Jacoby Brissett, like you said, was a big reason why they had the turnaround. 20 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions this year, had a 60% completion percentage, and he was a really good quarterback for them, transferring in from Miami a couple of years back. But Jalen McClendon there, he's a guy that's been backing him up over the last couple seasons, or excuse me, just last season. He's going into a sophomore campaign, and he's a lot like Virginia Tech quarterback Dwayne Lawson. He's a 4-star recruit that came in, and they burned his red shirt right away with limited playing time. But he was the backup quarterback, and all indications are that he could take over this coming season with Jacoby Brissett moving on. But what NC State's doing, they're bringing in Dylan Parham. He's a number 23rd rated quarterback, pocket passer, 6'5", 205. He's a big kid, just like Jacoby Brissett. And with all of the uncertainty at quarterback, especially when you're leaving behind a guy that has led you so far over the last couple seasons, and there's so much uncertainty at the position, it's really up to Dave Doeren's interpretation where he wants to go from here at quarterback. So while Jalen McClendon might have all the accolades coming out of high school, Dylan Parham is going to have his opportunity here coming in as a 3-star prospect out of Raleigh, North Carolina. So he's right down the road there from NC State, from the campus. He's a guy who's going to be able to come in and try to make an immediate impact and maybe win the starting quarterback job.
Yeah, looking at the rest of this class, it's not going to jump off the page, Mike. We talked about it before we came on. Not a ton of stars next to those names, but at the same time, it comes down to scouting, finding a good fit for your program, finding guys that can learn and develop, and possibly there's some diamonds in the rough there. Also finding the weaknesses in your program and your personnel and your roster right now and trying to fill those gaps. And obviously, again, the competition in the division is fierce. Your thoughts about who else is coming in that we could be seeing very quickly in the starting lineup or making an impact?
Yeah, and for all NC State has been talked about, and it's been a lot of Jacoby Brissett on offense, their defense is actually the strength of their team, and they were 29th in total defense this past season. They're returning a lot of impact players on that side of the football, but they are also bringing in a bunch of guys that I think could make an impact and play really well for them in the coming seasons. A couple guys on the defensive side of the football. These are all 3-star recruits, but guys who I think could be some diamonds in the rough. Isaiah Stallings is a huge safety, 6'4", 205. He's out of Fayetteville, North Carolina. He's a number 35 rated safety. in the class of 2016. And he's a guy who really is in the mold of a guy like Cam Chancellor, who used to play at Virginia Tech and now plays for the Seattle Seahawks, one of the best safeties in the NFL, just a real big kid. And anytime you have a safety who's physical like he is on his tape, on his high school tape anyway, and he plays at that size, I mean, that's something that really could be an asset for NC State moving forward. Speaking of guys that are massive, Shug Frazier, the number 41 defensive tackle in the country, 3-star recruit out of Buford, Georgia. He's 6'3", 320, a guy that can really plug up the middle of an offensive line, goes right up the gut there, and can really take down some of the running backs he's faced in high school. His high school film is extremely impressive there. He takes up the entire line there at 320, played a lot of nose tackle in high school, but he'll slide around there for NC State. And James Valdez, he's out of Orangeburg, South Carolina, number 55 cornerback. He's 6 foot, 175, so pretty good size for a corner. And he's another guy that can make an impact there in the defensive backfield for NC State. So those are just a couple guys, and they're littered with 3-star recruits this year. They have 22 solid commits here. We'll see how many of them actually sign on National Signing Day, but a lot of these guys have already committed and signed a letter of intent and are on campus. So we'll see how NC State's recruiting class stacks up when it's all said and done.
Yeah, there's so much publicity and hype given to the 4- and 5-star guys, and with all the TV attention in particular, it's tough to get excited about the 3-stars. But if you look at the top programs in the country, and certainly going down the ranks to an NC State that's considered about a top 40 to 50 program, 3-stars are pretty much the nucleus and the core of the team. Here's a number of guys as we approach National Signing Day, with a big visiting weekend just concluded, the last one coming up next weekend. Some guys that could turn this class probably another 10 or 12 spots up the ranks and seem to be leaning NC State at this point. We got defensive back J.J. Givens, who's right now, by all accounts, a 50-50 split between Maryland and NC State. He was just in College Park this past weekend. He's the 52nd ranked cornerback, according to Rivals and Scout.com. Got another cornerback in Nick McLeod, who's rated highly by Scout. He visited Georgia Tech this past weekend. He was leaning NC State. Again, Georgia Tech could snatch him away. At the wide receiver position, North Carolina State could do a lot of good for itself right here at the closing wire. Devontres Dukes is a player who formerly committed to Central Florida. Right now, it's between North Carolina State and Marshall. And even though Marshall doesn't get a whole lot of people excited, he had a ton of really high-level Power 5 schools looking at him previously, to narrowing it down to, again, North Carolina State and Marshall. You got Kelvin Harmon, who's a 4-star recruit out of New Jersey, most notably looking at Miami. And it's down to North Carolina State and Miami for Kelvin Harmon. And then also another wide receiver in Carlos Becker. Look at the last 2 schools that he visited and showed interest in, Florida State and Ohio State. He just went to those 2 locales, including Ole Miss. But it looks as though NC State and Florida State's a 50-50 split in regards to the lean for Carlos Becker, a kid that's the 13th rated wide receiver, according to Rivals and Scout, and he's an Under Armour All-America candidate. So NC State could really do some damage in the passing game with some of those wide receiver pickups, and also some help in the secondary there. Mike McDaniel from Inside the ACC, looking in at NC State with National Signing Day coming up very soon. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks, Mark.